Dr. Stuart Sheehan. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you, Pastor?
I'm doing well, sir. Doing well. Let me just give you guys a quick intro to what we're doing here. I've got you eavesdropping on a conversation between myself and Dr. Stuart Sheehan, who is the president of World Hope Ministries International, who, of course, you guys know the relationship between Grace and Truth and World Hope has just kind of organically always been there since Grace and Truth kind of got off the ground. So anyway, now with all the new developments that you've heard about and everything, as far as the work that we've got coming up in Latin America and so on, I just wanted you to hear it straight from the source. Dr. Sheehan's been a great mentor to me over the years. And if you guys have benefited at all from my ministry, then in some way you've benefited from his as well. A couple of quick examples. If you've ever heard me talk about the relationship between worship and laying on your face, right? Worship is to lay face down before God. That came from him. And various other things. The whole thing about rewards in heaven being crowns that we get to lay back at Jesus' feet. I learned that from him when we were stuck in Africa waiting for a car to show up. So anyway, I just wanted you guys to benefit from his leadership at World Hope the same way that I have, and kind of get his explanation for what we're biting off here as a Grace and Truth family with this new initiative in World Hope. So anyway, that's a little bit of an intro. I don't know if there's important information about what it means to be the president of World Hope Ministries International, but you lead the organization in various ways, and I love what God's doing through you, brother. So it's a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. And I just want to say to your church, thank you guys so much for being with us. We started really this as a full-time operation 10 years ago, as your pastor knows. And you guys were one of the churches several years ago that said, hey, we'll come help. And from 4 test locations in 2011 to 120 something locations today and 37 countries, that's been all God. And so you asked, what does it mean to be the president or CEO of World Hope? It means being duct taped to a rocket and God light the fuse. And you just try to hang on and say, Lord, what's next? What are you doing? Because I want to be with you.
Yeah, it's fun and it's scary. So yeah, but with that, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen to accommodate that kind of growth, because God entrusts to us to kind of, manage it. I mean, we always say around here that the pastors are middle management at the church. We're not running the thing. It's sort of like observe, take orders, and execute, right? So I want to talk a little bit about what that's looking like at World Hope. But first, maybe they've heard me talk about this a lot, Dr. Sheehan, about the impact that the Bible Institute has on like the pastors. But there's a bigger picture where pastors benefit the community, right? So you talk a lot about redemptive ministry as opposed to other things like exploitative ministry, where we just go in and say, well, here's what you need to do because we said so, and that kind of thing. But redemptive ministry actually has a Christ-centered impact on the people that we're serving, and it's not dependent on us. We get to back out after we make our contribution up front, and then they're equipped to make disciples. So maybe you could talk a little more or tell some stories or something about the impact that the Bible Institute ends up having in the communities where these pastors are.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, Dustin, I think it boils down to what is our doctrine of the church? So is his answer an organization, a denomination, or is it his bride? And biblically, we know the answer. It's his bride. So part of what World Hope is focusing on is, how do you make that bride healthy? How do you make her all she can be? And statistically, of course, one in 15 pastors globally with no theological education is a hindrance to a healthy bride. And if you don't have a healthy bride, that means you've lost in that community the salt and light, the grace and truth that God is at work in through his people in his local church. So just like Grace and Truth has all these fingers going out into the Tri-Cities area where God is working, every church should be that in her community. And so if you look at what World Hope is doing, just from a theological standpoint, like a biblical, we're principled in this, that we need healthy churches. That means we need trained pastors. Now, then what's the impact of that? And I could just give you story after story after story where we have seen communities that were divided come together, pastors who were in their little denominational silos say, oh, wait a minute, if we all agree on all of this core doctrine, we could actually work together. and to see some of that, we've seen tribal conflicts in Africa salved. We've seen house church movements in China. I mean, you've been there with me in years past. Go explode. And so if you think about what is the impact of a trained pastor, you answer that by saying, what is a healthy church? And then if you say, how is a community really supposed to be transformed? It's not through World Hope. It's not through a denomination. It's not through, and a lot of great mission organizations, but it's not that. It really is through his church. And so we want to be very church focused.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I thought of a story where at a location that we were discussing before I hit record here, where we had these students in the Bible Institute, these pastors, and there were problems between their churches because they had one guy with a lot of money who was involved in multiple churches and was leveraging things and pulling levers and so on because he could fund it. And so, hey, I'll build your building, I'll do this and that. And he wanted all these fringe benefits and kickbacks and stuff. And it turns out he was just a really rich wolf. And so our regional coordinator down there, he pulls me in and says, hey, these guys are listening to you this week. Why don't you go ahead and instruct them on what to do? So we sit in this circle and they're talking, and I'm just like, this is a mess. What do you do? And so we just worked through it with the biblical principles that we've been learning, because I was teaching the ecclesiology course.
Yes.
World Hope. And so those pastors ended up all coming around to the same point of view. And not just because I told them what to think. It was because we opened Titus and we said, what's going to be happening here? And 1st and 2nd Timothy. And they put together a strategy on how to deal with this guy. And now you've got one unit where you had fragmented, warring factions, and Christ was honored, and Satan got kicked in the throat, which is always fun to see. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's how much the prosperity gospel has invaded the church like a cancer. And, I'll tell this story on you to your church.
Oh no!
So we're in a location in the slums of Nairobi, and your pastor does something amazing. He sees this poster.
Oh, you love
this
telling
prosperity
this story,
gospel preacher, and he's teaching against it. And so object lessons are, of course, highly valuable when you're teaching cross culturally. And in this dirt floor church, your pastor actually took the bulletin of this calendar with this prosperity gospel preacher on it, and he set fire to it in the church. And I think you got a hearty amen to that when it was over, because it was it was bold. It was awesome.
Well, yeah, the point there was we don't play nice with idols, right? We smash them.
Exactly. And how does that affect a local church? If a pastor's preaching that on a Sunday, can you imagine how unhealthy that church is? And then there's no salt and light in that community. So it's directly connected.
Yeah. Then, like you said, the stories are just coming out our ears, and so, and anybody that goes with us on a global reach team, they don't even have to be, teaching the Bible Institute.
They'll see it.
Yeah. They're going on the global reach team. And it's like, it's a whole different, it's a whole different set of challenges, and it's a different risk factor. It's like, man, if we don't fix this, we got 1 week. And if we don't address this now, then we will have left this situation just as bad as we found it. And it's really cool to see what the Holy Spirit empowers us to do there.
I love it.
Yeah. Let me ask you about something that you said about a year and a half ago. So of course it's, high COVID, everything's locked down. We can't go anywhere. And you made a comment to me that just because of the stuff that was getting put into place and all of the opportunities that were potential at that point, you said, God's got a lot of arrows in his quiver to accomplish the Great Commission. World Hope is one of them. And you said right now, so a year and a half ago, right now, it's like he's pulling the bowstring back, and there's a lot of tension, and we don't know what direction he's going to shoot the arrow yet, but we're starting to figure it out. And so since then, there's been a lot more specifics kind of filled in. And so there's a strategy now to kind of take World Hope to a level of effectiveness and a reach. And you guys have been, behind the scenes resourced for it. It seems like human resource wise and otherwise. And so I just want to get you talking a little bit about where we're going over the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that we learned during COVID, while he was pulling that string back and we were feeling that tension, is that we learned that our approach, which is built on a 2 Timothy 2:2 model, to invest in these nationals who then become empowered. That's part of that redemptive approach to ministry is they don't remain dependent on us. Of course, we coach, mentor, hold them accountable, but they're empowered to go be those teachers in their local context. When we could not go during COVID in 2020, we still taught about 75% of the courses globally that we would have taught had we gone. And that was all done by nationals. What that made us do is say, oh my goodness, we didn't believe our own model enough. And so, because in 2021, while we still substantially could not travel, we taught over 200 courses in globally, 264 courses, I think is the number.
Wow.
And that was primarily done by nationals. And so seeing the nationals take on the majority of the work led us to say, we are not being aggressive enough. We had set out an 8-year plan to go from about 4,500 students to 18 to 20,000. And when we started seeing this, feeling that tension, that string pull back, we sat down and I sat down with the board and I said, guys, I don't think we're believing God for enough. In fact, somebody who has been a consultant to us said, your sights are set way too low. If what you're saying is true, if the need is that big and God has given you this much success, why are you not more aggressive? Why is your faith not bigger? And that really challenged us.
Wow.
So basically what we did is blew up our 8 or 9 year plan and moved it into a 4-year plan. And so now we're looking at expanding from roughly 37 countries now to about 80 countries by January 1, 2027. So that's going to be soon. And to go from a current about, now we're up to 5,000 students because we grew during COVID, which was crazy. And,
You saw that coming.
Yeah, and to go from 5,000 students to somewhere around 20,000 students by the beginning of 2027. What that means is that we've got a lot of work to do, and God is now. It feels like He's literally kind of releasing. You can feel His fingers moving off it. And I'm a bow hunter, so there's this point where you're letting the string go, and this is the point of no return. I feel like we're there. And so we're looking and we're praying, God, we're going to need a lot of help, a lot of hands to make this work. Because one of the things I've learned going from 4 countries to 37 is that the more work I give away, the more work God gives us to do.
Yeah.
And it's not about holding it and controlling it. It's about empowering and watching other people fly. So that's where you come into the picture.
Yeah, well, and let me just talk about 2 different metrics. I'm going to screen share here and have you explain 2 of these charts from that from the document that kind of explains that 4-year plan. So this one here is crazy to me, just how there's so much good news and great commission victory wrapped up in this chart. So can you explain to Grace and Truth what's going on here?
Yeah. So again, we started in 2011, and when we started, it was all U.S. instructors. And we're doing this with the belief that eventually we're going to raise up instructors. And at some point, we're going to hit a tipping point, and we're going to start seeing as many or more nationals instructing as U.S.-based instructors. So in 2018, we were still at 29, a little north of 29% of nationals teaching and over 70% of U.S. instructors teaching. And then in 2019, we finally saw that invert. 63% became nationals of our instructors globally were nationals, and 36+% were U.S. instructors. Now, everybody knows what happened in 2020. You and I are having this conversation almost 2 years to the date when our future changed, when everything got shut down.
March, wasn't it?
That it was. And we had no idea this was coming in 2020, but God did. And so you look what God did in 2019. That made us able to keep going in 2020 when U.S. instructors couldn't travel. And it's hard for me not to talk about that and not get emotional, because that was the foresight of God, who knew COVID would come and wanted the work to continue. So not only did it mean we were successful during COVID, which is ridiculous, but it also meant that God was affirming His model, 2 Timothy 2:2, the things which you have seen and heard from me, in the presence of many witnesses and trust a faithful men who will also be able to teach others. God was affirming our work in that model.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just extraordinary.
Yeah. And I remember hearing about that and just thinking like, so I don't know if my camera turned off. I'm scrolling through something here for one more chart. But yeah, I was talking to you and some of the other folks at World Hope, and it was, at the, middle of 2021. And we were talking specifically about West Africa and how the guys there that had graduated the institutes and become regional coordinators and so on, and they're expanding even into other countries, and we couldn't even get there.
Yeah, they opened in Burkina Faso at the end of this past year. If you know your geography, that is amazing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and some of that's hostile territory too. I mean,
exactly.
That was frontier stuff,
Exactly.
All right, so let me give you one more and have you tell us what's going on here. This goes to resources and support, and I want Grace and Truth to see this because World Hope is on our monthly support list, so we're sending a little bit of support. We wish it could be more, but we're sending a little support to World Hope each month, and this is kind of how that gets broken out. So what's going on in this chart?
Yeah, so what we did is we took what does it cost us on a global average to provide 4 courses, to deliver 4 courses in the field face to face. And for 2022, that projected average is around $250. I think it's $256, if I'm remembering the exact number correctly. And that's looking at the current number of students sitting at about 4,500 when we started 2022. When biblical replication starts to happen, an amazing thing happens. Your cost basis goes down significantly. And over the curve of this, you can look, it just drops. Meanwhile, in an inverse curve, you have the student counts going up. This is the power of a replicating model of theology training rather than an institutional model. As institutions get larger, they actually require more per student to educate. And any of these guys who are sending kids to college know that's exactly right. Yeah. It's just getting crazy now. But in a replicating model, the costs don't go up per student, the costs go down per student. And so that's what we're looking at over the next 4 years. And 4+ years, almost 5 years. So it is amazing what can happen.
Yeah. So I jumped on board, and I think my first trip was in 2014 or something. So at that point, let's say if somebody gave $250 to my mission trip, that trained a student. And yeah, now we're looking at that training close to 3 students for the same investment.
Yeah. So when it gets down to the near the end of this growth initiative that we're in the middle of, I think it's down to like 80 something dollars, which means you're delivering a basic course of theology at $20 for a course, face-to-face taught in the field, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, unheard of. And these guys, I mean, they have to sacrifice a lot to get there. They've got to travel. They've got to.
They are. That's our cost. We've got teachers raising funds to go. We've got students who are raising money to buy a bag of meal, to make some mash to eat, or a bag of beans. Everybody's putting in. And that's what's beautiful about this. And I think it's part of what makes it redemptive too, because it's not about World Hope being the answer. It's about us being the catalyst to see God network all these resources together to do something amazing that only He could have done.
Yeah, and that's your definition of the redemptive model of ministry was really helpful for me, because your definition was something like, and you'll have to correct my words here, we sacrifice and then everybody wins, essentially.
Yeah,
and that's Christ's model.
Just to break it down, an exploitive model says, you do what I say and I'll win. An ethical model, which should be, by the way, the minimum for Christians is we both sacrifice, we'll both win. But redemptive is the Jesus model. Jesus said, I'll sacrifice so you win. It is that giving of self. And when you can let go of self and not say, hey, let's have a handshake deal, it'll be ethical, we'll both give, we'll make something amazing happen. It's beyond that. It's saying, Lord, here we are. We give ourselves to you. You write my paycheck every day. You fill out how many breaths I'll breathe. And as long as you give me resource and breath, I'm yours, and I'll sacrifice so that I can see other people win. And then what happens in this replicating model, Dustin, that redemptive model is like ripples in a pond. It begins to move forward, and its capacity is, it's God-sized, and it's a God-sized need.
Yeah, and these guys that have been sacrificed for, then they graduate, they wind up sacrificing for others.
And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, think about David, who you were with me when we first started in Ivory Coast. And you remember David, precious brother. I mean, he is so in deep in what God has him doing in Ivory Coast, opening new locations. But he said, I have been given, and many of my brothers have not received. And we've got to get this to them. That's the beauty of redemptive work.
Yeah. And over the last, I don't know what, 5-6 years or something, we've seen David, because we were there when you took me along, and that was kind of his launch, right? And he was the number 2 guy. He was like a theological ankle biter, and now he's the mover and shaker over West Africa. And it's just, and he's so like just calm and mild and humble, but God's just concentrating a lot of power and resources through him. And
it really is
happening, and we become spectators in a lot of this stuff, which is that's the plan.
That is. And then we all get to praise the Lord, because we know it wasn't any one of us. So thankful for grace and truth giving. But no one person could support the budget of what we need. Well, even if they could, why would you want them to? Why can't we? Because I don't want one person praying. I want 1,000 people praying.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of shared ministry. And so I just love what we get to do.
Well, I really appreciate your time. And I know you just got back from a trip to a very different time zone. So in Texas time, it's late afternoon, and you're probably dragging right now. So I'll let you go. But thanks for taking a minute to chat with the church and everything. And there's a lot of love that I get to send your direction from people that you don't get to meet. I mean, you've been up here once before, and you filled my pulpit and stuff, and that was great. But you don't get to have the relationships with everybody here. But there's a lot of love from everybody at Grace and Truth that we send your direction. So, and
a lot of love from here back up to you guys.
Well, I appreciate it again. And any time investment from you is much appreciated. So thank you. And we'll be talking to you soon.
I love you, brother. And I'm excited about the future.
I love you back, brother. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.